Today, we're looking at a green ink by Callifolio Teodora. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that you can skip around to the parts you're most interested in, or if you watch the whole thing, I'd appreciate you. You can follow me on Instagram, and if you're new here and like fountain pen inks as much as I do, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Nimicine Fission with a broad nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. In order to standardize some of the writing sample, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, more papers are tested, and they'll show up a bit later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 12 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows no color variation because we weren't getting any in the writing. Tomoe River with no bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. Extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 14 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 20 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both shows no color variation because we weren't getting any in the writing. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is just a little lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some shading throughout, a peppering of dark spots throughout this writing. 9 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 13 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine, far left to far right, shows us color variation, and that's the speckling of color that we get. Medium shows us none, and we got none. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And this is a tough one to call for me because I'm really looking at it and see a very bright minty green on the bottom. And as it moves up, I see a very specific second green that looks also like a bright green. At the very top, what it looks like is there's some blue in that brighter green, making a very dark green across the top. It appears like there's some darker blue at the very top making that happen. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now that minty green is a little bit more obvious. There's less of that green, but again, I'm left with either that's a dark blue at the very top mixing with that green, or it's some purple, perhaps. Interesting. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I would not use this in a note-taking situation because it blew out on a lowercase h, and I'm very risk-averse of my notes. I like to protect them. That's not a surprising result when you look at what happened with water. Water's completely removing this from the paper, and so obviously it wouldn't be good for note-taking. Now that's all it took to get it out of my pens. Pen flush is doing everything that water did, and slightly faster. I mean, we see a lot more of the white of the paper coming through. Where you see some of the green left is where I dabbed and held the paper towel down, but you shouldn't need pen flush. 1/3 bleach solution completely removes it from the paper, and you're not going to need it to get it out of your pen. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. I'm also linking a video that shows how I do my testing and my calculations. Callifolio's Teodora has a viscosity of 2.67, making it normal. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. I find this by using my writing samples that were done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Callifolio's Teodora has an average dry time of 13 seconds, putting it right on the very edge of normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Callifolio's Teodora, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went for a nice purple because I like putting purples with greens. Don't know why. I chose Private Reserve's Purple Haze. The second writing sample is done on Levenger, P. Berger, and Strathmore writing paper. Here we're looking at P. Berger. It's a French rule student grade paper. Now we get a ton of bleed through. Some of this did speckle the page underneath. That was a problem for me. There's a ton of ghosting as a result of all of that bleed. So I wouldn't use it with this paper. The 1.1 has feathering. A ton of tiny feathers, very tiny feathers. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine is just a little bit lighter than the stub. With no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade, performed well other than all that bleeding and show through with 3 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with a ton of tiny feathering all over it. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us, well, the medium shows some color variation, far left to far right. It wasn't in the writing. The extra fine shows none, and there was none. How about Levenger paper? No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 4 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 7 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any in the writing. And last up is Strathmore writing paper, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 had no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Extra fine is lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 3 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 6 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both shows no color variation because there was none, and that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Callifolio's Teodora? For the most part, this is a very straightforward green that offers very little shading, but still gives a pleasant tone on the page. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? While it can give spots of shading under the right conditions, it's not worth the search to find it. Instead, just go ahead and use a wet medium or wet broad, put it down a little bit darker, and get the best green out of this ink that you can. I'm going to remind you that I'm here every day with a new ink review. Thanks for watching.